The story of the Warsaw Ghetto. This narrative is proudly brought to you by Polly Speaks For You. At Polly Speaks For You, we are committed to empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through innovative text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You is more than just software. It's a tool for self-expression, connecting people with the world in meaningful ways. By blending the richness of history with cutting-edge technology, Polly Speaks For You demonstrates that every voice, whether preserving the past or shaping the future, has the potential to inspire. While we strive to make the story engaging, our primary focus is on storytelling itself. The visuals are secondary. We're showcasing the remarkable capabilities of text-to-speech software that bring these stories to life. The Warsaw Ghetto, established by Nazi Germany during World War II, stands as one of the most tragic symbols of the Holocaust. Created in November 1940, it was the largest of all Jewish ghettos in Nazi-occupied Europe, confining over 400,000 Jews in a small, overcrowded section of Warsaw, Poland. The ghetto, surrounded by 10-foot walls topped with barbed wire, became a prison of unimaginable suffering, starvation, and systematic extermination. Yet, despite these conditions, it also became a site of resistance, resilience, and the desperate fight for survival against overwhelming odds. This narrative is proudly brought to you by Polly Speaks For You. At Polly Speaks For You, we are committed to empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through innovative text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You is more than just software. It's a tool for self-expression, connecting people with the world in meaningful ways. By blending the richness of history with cutting-edge technology, Polly Speaks For You demonstrates that every voice, whether preserving the past or shaping the future, has the potential to inspire. While we strive to make the story engaging, our primary focus is on storytelling itself. The visuals are secondary. We're showcasing the remarkable capabilities of text-to-speech software that bring these stories to life. The Nazis implemented their genocidal policies in the ghetto as part of the broader final solution, aiming to exterminate the Jewish population of Europe. They imposed brutal conditions on the inhabitants, forcing them into slave labor and cutting off vital supplies of food and medicine. Life in the ghetto was a constant battle, not just against the German forces, but also against hunger, disease, and despair. Life in the ghetto, a living hell. In the overcrowded streets of the ghetto, daily life was a struggle for survival. Families were cramped into tiny rooms, with sometimes as many as 10 to 12 people sharing a single space. With no running water, inadequate sanitation, and meager food rations, conditions were horrific. The official rations provided by the Nazis amounted to around 180 calories per day per person, an amount that guaranteed slow starvation. People scavenged for food, relying on the black market or whatever meager resources they could smuggle into the ghetto. Diary entry: Emanuel Ringelblum, historian, Warsaw Ghetto. The streets of the ghetto are filled with children, women, and men with hollowed cheeks, begging for a piece of bread. Disease is rampant: typhus, dysentery. Every day, corpses lie abandoned in the streets, wrapped in rags. The smell of death hangs in the air. The ghetto's population dwindled as starvation and disease took their toll. In the worst months, hundreds of bodies could be found lying in the streets, victims of hunger and illness, often left unburied for days. Hospitals were overcrowded and undersupplied, and the rampant spread of typhus became a daily nightmare. Estimates suggest that by the time of the ghetto's liquidation in 1943, more than 83,000 people had perished from malnutrition and disease. Anecdote: Janina Bauman, Warsaw Ghetto survivor. My sister and I were only 12 and 14, but we knew that if we didn't act, our family would starve. So, we sneaked out through the sewers, risking our lives to get bread. We crawled through the filth and dark, terrified of being caught. But when we returned to the ghetto, my mother wept with relief. That bread kept us alive for another week. The acts of defiance, like smuggling food or simply surviving another day, became heroic acts in a world designed to crush the human spirit. Children were often the ones tasked with smuggling. as their small size allowed them to sneak through openings or gaps in the ghetto wall. But this bravery came with great risk. Those caught smuggling were executed on the spot by German guards. German High Command orders. The policy of terror intensified in 1942 when the Nazi regime began to implement the final solution in earnest. The infamous Wannsee Conference, held in January of that year, formalized the plan for the extermination of European Jewry. The Warsaw Ghetto, by this time, was seen as a temporary holding pen, and Heinrich Himmler, one of the architects of the Holocaust, ordered its liquidation. Ordered by Heinrich Himmler, July 1942, the Jewish quarter of Warsaw is to be cleared. The operation is to proceed with all speed and ruthlessness. The Jews are to be transported to the east. This chilling order marked the beginning of mass deportations from the Warsaw Ghetto to the Treblinka extermination camp. Over the course of the Great Deportation between July and September 1942, around 300,000 Jews were rounded up, packed into cattle cars, and sent to their deaths at Treblinka. The Nazis disguised the deportations as resettlement to the east, but those who boarded the trains never returned. Anecdote, survivor testimony. The German soldiers told us we were being taken to a labor camp. They said to bring only what we could carry. My mother packed a few clothes and some food. We believed them, but when the doors of the train car slammed shut, we knew. The air was thick with panic and fear. The train didn't stop for hours. It was Treblinka. In this way, the Warsaw Ghetto was systematically emptied. Tens of thousands were deported each day, crammed into freight trains with no food or water. For those left behind, a terrible fate awaited: resistance and the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. By 1943, the remaining inhabitants of the ghetto had learned the truth about the deportations. They knew that they were being sent to their deaths, not to labor camps, and a spirit of resistance began to grow. Despite their weakened state and lack of weapons, Jewish fighters in the ghetto began to organize an armed resistance. The Jewish Combat Organization, OB, led by Mordecai Anielewicz, and the Jewish Military Union, ZW, prepared for an uprising. Marek Edelman, Warsaw Ghetto uprising leader, we knew we had no chance of winning. Our only goal was to die with dignity and show the world that Jews could fight. We had a handful of weapons and a lot of courage. On April 19, 1943, the day before Passover, the Nazis entered the ghetto with the intention of liquidating it entirely. But they were met with resistance. Using smuggled weapons and homemade bombs, the Jewish fighters launched a desperate, yet courageous, uprising. For nearly a month, they held off the heavily armed German forces, fighting from house to house and bunker to bunker. Anecdote: Simcha Rodum, Warsaw Ghetto fighter, we fought from house to house, room to room. Our weapons were few, but our resolve was strong. Every moment of resistance was a victory for us. The Nazis could not believe we were capable of standing up to them. The Germans responded with overwhelming force. They set fire to buildings, used tanks and artillery to crush the resistance, and bombed bunkers where civilians were hiding. The destruction was so extensive that the entire ghetto was left in ruins. By May 16, 1943, the uprising was crushed. The SS commander Jürgen Stroop, who led the Nazi forces in the ghetto, reported that the Jewish quarter of Warsaw is no more. Jürgen Stroop, SS commander, the Jewish criminals fought like animals, but we showed them no mercy. The final count: over 56,000 Jews destroyed. Stroop's infamous report, titled "The Warsaw Ghetto is No More," detailed the methodical destruction of the ghetto. The remaining inhabitants who had not died in the fighting or were executed on the spot were sent to death camps. The resistance had failed militarily, but it had succeeded in a far more important way, by showing the world that Jews fought back against the Nazi terror. The aftermath: a legacy of defiance. Though the Warsaw Ghetto uprising was ultimately crushed, its legacy lives on as a symbol of resistance in the face of tyranny. The bravery of the Jewish fighters inspired other uprisings and acts of resistance in occupied Europe. It is remembered not just for the courage of those who fought, but for the moral clarity it brought to the world. Even in the darkest times, it is possible to fight back. Reminiscence: Zivia Lebetkin, OB leader, the ghetto may have been reduced to ashes, but the spirit of the fighters remains. We proved that we were not merely victims. We were fighters, and we will be remembered. In the years after the war, memorials were erected in Warsaw to honor the memory of those who lived, fought, and died in the ghetto. Today, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising stands as one of the most poignant symbols of resistance during the Holocaust, a powerful reminder that even in the face of annihilation, the human spirit can fight for dignity and survival. If you're enjoying this story, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating content that educates and empowers. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software and to support our dyslexic-friendly initiative, visit www.polispeaks4u.co.za. Drop a comment if you want more information. Thank you for watching this video.